Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. 1980 was the year that I became a Beach Boy completist. Prior to that time, I had picked up the Endless Summer collection when it was new. I'd picked up most of the hits pre-1967. But in 1980, that's when I really got interested in the Beach Boys and decided that I wanted to have a copy of every Beach Boy record, every solo project, every side project, anything that the Beach Boys were involved in. I wanted a copy of that in my collection. Now that theory was sorely tested in 1983 when Mike Love started releasing a series of recordings on the Realistic label. Now Realistic was the brand for Radio Shack. There were Realistic car stereos and CBs and stereo equipment with the Realistic moniker. And they also had a record label. The first release Mike Love was involved in was initially cassette only. Rock and Roll City by Mike Love of the Beach Boys and Dean Torrance of Jan and Dean. It initially came on this big cardboard backing. Now, of course, it wasn't just Mike and Dean. There were also special guests. Let me read you quickly the track listing on this thing. You've got Mike and Dean doing Lightning Strikes. You've got Walk Away Renee by The Association. Two Mike Love tracks, The Letter and Locomotion. Sealed with a Kiss by the Ripcords, Bruce and Terry. Then Mike Love finishing out side one of the cassette with Sugar Shack. Side two, you've got 96 Tears by Paul Revere and the Raiders. You've got California Dreaming by the Beach Boys, which is the first time their version of California Dreaming is released. So that's kind of interesting. Then you've got two Dean Torrance tracks, Baby Talk and Wild Thing. Then Mike Love does Da Do Run Run. And winding it up is Mike and Dean's version of My Boyfriend's Back, or called here Her Boyfriend's Back. Let me show you this thing. So there you've got, so as I showed you the front cover, so back cover, you've got, there's the Beach Boys with Dennis still in the lineup being 83. Down here you've got Bruce and Terry, the Ripcords. There's Bruce. Don't know how he got mixed up in this thing, poor guy. Paul Revere and the Raiders looking a little bit like Adam and the Ants there. And then over there you've got the Association. Let me read you a little bit about how they describe the recordings. These liner notes in the back. This is some of it. We took a trip down memory lane to select songs for Rock and Roll City. First, we listened to hundreds of hits of the 60s. Very few were as good as we remembered. They didn't have the power that memory promised. It reminded us of the change in the recording industry from the days when there was no stereo, let alone 24-track recording. We decided we shouldn't cover these old hits, even with famous artists, unless the new versions were better, much better than the originals. That's what Rock and Roll City is, better than the originals. Well, I've heard this, and I can tell you they missed the mark. And also, I don't think there was probably anybody who listens to 96 Tears and says the problem with it is it wasn't recorded on 24-track. Anyway, this was the kind of thing that would sit up by the counter at Radio Shack. Got it upside down. Sit up by the counter at Radio Shack. Somebody might impulse buy it, say, oh, you know, I'm Mike from the Beach Boys, Dean Torrance, I know these songs, I know these artists, I'll pick this up, take this cassette out to the car, put it in, go, what in the world is this? Throw it on the floor and never think of it again, but they'd have your $5 or $6, whatever it was in those days. It's, as you would expect, forgettable at best. It's actually worse because this is the point at which Mike Love's singing becomes a parody of itself. I mean, he could be nasal. He could also sing, quite nicely. But on this, he just cuts loose with the nasal. It sounds like a grown man going, yeah, 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 yeah. He was made fun of in the scripted comedy routine, Cassius Love versus Sonny Wilson on Shutdown Volume 2 back in 1963. Made fun of for sounding like his nose was on the critical list. But here, he just cranks it up. I don't know whether Dean egged him on, because Dean could certainly sing in an annoying way once in a while too. But if you listen through the Beach Boys catalog, when you get to this, Mike Love suddenly becomes very hard to listen to. And of course, the backing is sort of nondescript, forgettable, but I bought a copy from my collection. It was also released apparently on vinyl under the name Rock and Roll, Mike and Dean's Rock and Roll Again. There's various permutations of it that were all released, I think about the same time. But that was the initial, was on cassette. So imagine my chagrin a few months later when a Mike Love track appears on another realistic recording, New Memories by The Association. Mike is on here on one track, the final track. He's got a version of Stagger Lee, which I'm sure was recorded at the same time as the others, as some leftover track. So on this album, you get not only The Association and Mike Love, you also get Bobby V and Mary Macgregor getting sucked into the abyss of the realistic label. So I bought this, and there's Mike all airbrushed. I guess the Association's only on the front cover in their little cartoon form. This is where you can get, if you're looking for it for some reason, Mike Love's version of Stagger Lee. But that was not all. For Christmas, they treated us to Christmas Party. Yes, all of our realistic label friends were back for the big 1983 Christmas Party. And on this, let me just, we've got once again Paul Revere and the Raiders. We've now got Three Dog Night in the mix, Bobby Goldsboro, Merrily Rush, and I'm pretty sure Mary Macgregor is in here duetting with Mike. So the Mike tracks on this is his duet with Mary Macgregor, Do You Hear What I Hear? You've got Mike and Dean doing Jingle Bell Rock, and then you've got Mike performing solo, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Now the interesting thing about this was there was actually a show, and here's a shot from it, called Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas that was aired in December of '84. I don't know if they didn't have it ready in '83 or they couldn't find a buyer or what happened. So there was a special aired, Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas, and the soundtrack was also available with a different cover under the title Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas with a picture of Jack Elam. If you don't know Jack Elam, he was a character actor in cowboy movies from the 50s through about the mid-90s. If it was a TV show with a cowboy in it, Jack Elam was probably in there somewhere at some point. He usually played a heavy, like a henchman, or a drunk in a saloon. In Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas, he plays Scrooge. And he plays him, as you would expect Jack Elam to do, like a drunk cowboy, which is what you get when you hire Jack Elam. And it's probably was a good choice not to have him try to do a mid-Victorian London merchant accent. And the whole plot revolves around some woman walks in with a crystal ball or a snow globe. She shakes it up and you see Paul Revere and the Raiders singing Jingle Bells. Now Mike Love and Mary Macgregor appear together doing their Do You Hear What I Hear duet. Mary Macgregor holding a lamb on some kind, I think it's on like a phony bridge or something. You can find it on YouTube. Mike sings to the lamb. It's one of the finest boy, girl, sheep trios I've ever seen. It's, oh boy. A little later on, Mike and Dean frolic while singing Jingle Bell Rock, hitting each other with snowballs and riding around in a sleigh, and you can just imagine. And then Mike actually walks into Scrooge's office and sings Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. He's the only one that actually appears with Jack Elam and has a few words of dialogue. And that's it. It aired. Go figure. I certainly don't remember. I couldn't even figure out which network it aired on. One that was a little light on programming that week, I guess. So there you have it. Now, that seems to be it. Although I've heard only as a download, that there's a single of Mike Love doing a Jingle Bell Rock with a song called Let's Party on the B-side, which apparently was released somewhere in there. It's dated 1983. I've never seen an actual copy of it, so I don't know whether it actually was released or it was pressed and not released, or who knows. You can imagine what the A-side's like. Actually, the B-side, Let's Party, is a forgettable throwaway, but it actually is kind of a jam, and actually it's way better than anything else. It's not just some lame cover. It's completely unnecessary and forgettable, but it's kind of genius compared to anything else. So I'm not sure that it's even part of the same group of recordings because it sounds so different. But anyway, if anybody knows about that single, I'd be really interested to figure out where I could get a copy. Did it actually get released? Again, just for curiosity's sake. So that was Mike Love, The Realistic Years, or Year. Fortunately, after that, Mike Love and Realistic seemed to go their separate ways. Radio Shack was there to provide coax cable anytime you needed it for many, many years until it finally couldn't get by on selling coax cable and RCA adapters for 30 cents. I don't know how they lasted as long as they did, but I was always glad they were there when I needed some sort of electronic device, because they always had it and it was always cheap. So I miss Radio Shack. I don't miss Mike Love's cover recordings, however. Thanks for watching. Hope you found this interesting. There's a lot more to talk about. Please like and subscribe. Really appreciate it. Bye.